one of the key ideas with transactional memory is that all shared data is accessed only from a transaction. And it's a data race if also there are accesses to that data, to shared data, from outside a transaction. So that's a severe bug. However, there are situations when it's better to be able to access shared data also outside of transactions. And one such situation is when some objects are shared for some part of the program, and then after some point it's only one thread that needs that data. And then it's better to avoid using transactions, since there is always some overhead, in particular for software transactional memory. Another is that if we want to, for instance, print data, then that cannot be done, I mean input-output in general. It cannot be done in a transaction, since the transaction must be able to be restarted, and that's not compatible with I/O. Okay, so in some way it should be possible to access data in a private way. And we will see for Power 8 how, for instance, I/O can be handled with special instructions. So if we compare transactional memory and locking, what's the main difference for when we use them for performance programming? Okay, there can be no deadlocks in transactional memory, but there can be poor performance if there are many conflicts. Okay, the main idea with, I mean, the most critical thing with multi-core programming is to, well, one of the most critical things is to partition the data so that we can, on the one hand, avoid lock contention and communication between different threads, and for transactional memory, avoid conflicts. It is actually the same goal, namely to partition the data between different threads so that these communications are minimized. So that is really the same. Okay, so if we compare critical section performance and transactions, once we get a lock, there is absolutely no artificial thing such as logging when we have locks. It's full speed within the critical section. But with transactional memory, there can be overhead due to logging by software, or that the buffer that the local writes are written to is overflowing. Okay, and debugging, it's, well, there is nothing special when we have locks. It's just to set the breakpoint and do debugging as usual. Of course, parallel program is typically non-deterministic, so it's more complicated than for sequential programs, but it's quite natural. Depending on the hardware support, it can be difficult to set breakpoints in the middle of a transaction. And again, we will see how Power 8 handles this. To make shared data private, well, that's trivial with locks, since it's just to access it and make sure no one else does. And for transactional memory, there must be some kind of hardware support, otherwise there will be a performance penalty.